I was 16 when the bells of Ironfell rang for the last royal wedding. Even now, when the wind moves through the broken tower windows, I hear their echo as if the air itself still remembers. I had been a stable boy once, nothing more, but the princess trusted no one and her father trusted only me. That is how I came to see what no historian ever wrote. Her name was Princess Elara of Varnhelm, the last daughter of a line that believed blood could seal blessings. The kingdom called her the Light of the East, though light was not what I saw in her eyes the day they promised her to Prince Adrian of the Northern Marches. She stood beside the marble fountain in the inner garden, a book in her hands, and asked me if horses ever chose whom they carried into battle. When I told her no, she smiled sadly. "Then I suppose I must be the horse," she said, "and the war will ride me." The preparations began that same week. The tailors worked day and night. Red silk arrived from the coast, dyed with crushed petals imported from a desert oasis, or so they said. I remember the way the color bled on my fingers when I carried the bolts of cloth to her chambers. It was not the faint sweetness of roses that touched my nose, but the metallic tang of something warmer. In those days, the palace was never silent. Servants hurried through corridors, priests muttered blessings, and guards polished armor for a ceremony meant only for peace. Yet in the middle of it all, the princess moved like someone half awake, bound to a dream she could not escape. She would sit by her window after sunset, watching the last light fade, her fingertips pressed to the glass as though she felt something beating on the other side. One night, she sent for me. I found her standing before the great mirror her mother had brought from the southern colonies, a mirror rumored to show not the face but the heart of whoever looked into it. The room was dark except for a single candle behind her. "Tell me, Lorien," she said, "what do you see?" I hesitated. The reflection was strange. The candle's flame behind her seemed to burn through the veil she had draped loosely over her shoulders. The red deepened into black near the edges, as if smoke had entered the silk. Her own eyes, reflected in that glass, glowed faintly, like embers. "I see you, my lady," I answered. "Only me?" she whispered. "Look again." I looked, and for a moment the mirror did not show me at all. It showed her standing alone in an empty hall, her veil heavy with something dark. When I blinked, the image was gone, and only our frightened faces remained. She laughed softly, the sound of someone trying not to cry. "Perhaps it is only the dye," she said. "The merchant told me it was strong enough to stain even dreams." From that night onward, she began to keep a diary, writing every dusk until dawn. Once, while fetching ink, I glimpsed a line that chilled me. "If love is a bond, then grief is the chain that keeps it from breaking." I never saw her write again after that. The wedding day came shrouded in fog. The sun refused to climb above the palace roof, and the guests whispered that the weather itself mourned her. She wore the red veil, not on her head at first, but wrapped around her arms, like a promise she dreaded to keep. I stood among the servants, near enough to see her tremble when the prince lifted it over her face. For one breath, her eyes met mine through the thin silk. I thought I saw relief. Then the priest spoke the final words, and the hall filled with applause that sounded more like thunder. That night, the palace feasted. Wine flowed, music rose, laughter echoed, but none of it touched the royal chamber. I was ordered to stand guard outside her door until dawn. From within, I heard neither laughter nor talk, only the faint rhythm of her footsteps. At midnight, there came a low hum, like wind trapped in a shell, then silence. Moments later, the door opened slightly, and a hand, her hand, reached out. It held the veil, damp and glistening as though with dew. "Take it," she said. "The roses have bled enough." I took it without understanding. My gloves grew heavy, and when I stepped into the torchlight, I saw the drops fall onto the marble floor, each one blooming into a small crimson star. I called for help, but when the guards burst in, the room was empty. Only the veil lay across the bed, folded neatly, its color deep as the heart of a storm. They searched for her for 7 days. The prince swore she had fled. The king accused him of murder. By the 10th day, the court began to rot from suspicion. And then, on the 12th night, a maid found something in the old chapel, the veil, hanging from the statue of Saint Mira, the patron of lost brides. Beneath it, the candlelight flickered blood red. No one touched it after that. The chroniclers wrote of her disappearance as an act of madness, or perhaps divine punishment. But I saw the truth in the reflection of that mirror. Every full moon since that night, the hall fills with a faint perfume, not roses, not incense, but iron and salt. And when the moonlight strikes the glass, the veil appears again, suspended as if an invisible hand still holds it. Years later, when the Northern Wars burned the palace, I returned once more to that chamber. The mirror lay cracked, the bed charred, yet the veil remained untouched on the floor. I knelt to pick it up. It was warm. Through the broken window, the wind carried a whisper. The chain is not yet broken. I left the kingdom the next morning, carrying the veil wrapped in plain linen. I never told a soul where I hid it. The blood had dried, but the silk retained its color, as though it had fed on time itself. Once in the deserts beyond the border, a merchant asked why I traveled with cloth fit for a queen. I told him it was a relic of a saint. He laughed and said, "Saints do not bleed." Sometimes at night I unfold it and see faint impressions where her fingers once pressed the fabric. The marks seem newer each time, and though I am old now, I swear the red grows brighter with every passing moon. Perhaps it drinks the light. Perhaps it waits for her return. If these pages survive me, let whoever finds them know this. The red veil was not sewn, it was sealed. And within that seal sleeps a heart that never learned how to die. I did not return to Ironfell for many years. Wars came and went, kings rose and fell, and time wore down even the marble lions that once guarded the gate. Yet the night I first dreamt of her again, I knew the veil was calling. I saw her standing in the corridor of mirrors, her face hidden but her voice clear as water. "Lorien," she said, "the chain is breaking." When I awoke, the cloth beside my bed was damp with something darker than dew. I tried to burn it once. God forgive me, I did. I built a small fire in the desert wind, laid the folded silk upon the coals, and waited for smoke. None came. The flames curved around it like frightened beasts refusing to touch. Then, without sound, the fire died. The sand beneath the veil turned black, though no ash remained. I buried it again and rode north. Still, every dawn, the smell of roses and iron followed. When I reached the ruins of the old capital, only the cathedral tower stood. The rest had crumbled into a skeleton of stone. I climbed those broken steps, meaning to leave the veil in the chapel where they had found it before. But at the altar stood a young girl, no more than 17, her hair pale as frost. She was humming the old wedding hymn. I froze. She turned and smiled. "You brought it back," she said. "I have waited so long." I told her she was mistaken. She stepped closer, and I saw the chain of rubies around her neck, the same that Princess Alara had worn the night she vanished. Each gem glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. "You were there," she whispered. "You saw the mirror. You saw me leave." I wanted to deny it, but the air had turned thick. The world around her blurred, as though memory itself were bending. "Tell me," I said, "what happened that night?" Her eyes darkened. "The mirror opened," she said. "It was never a reflection. It was a doorway. He thought he could bind my soul with vows and silk, but the veil chose differently. The blood of the innocent dyes it. The blood of the willing frees it." She touched the chain at her throat. I chose. I asked what she wanted from me. She smiled gently. "Only to finish what began." She reached for the veil. Instinctively, I stepped back, but the fabric rose on its own, twisting in the air between us like a living flame. "Do you hear it?" she asked. The air filled with whispers, thousands of voices murmuring from the cracks of the ruined church. They were praying or begging. "They still remember," she said, "and so will the world." Suddenly, the light outside turned crimson. Through the shattered windows, I saw the moon eclipsed by a red shadow. The girl's outline shimmered, splitting into two shapes, the princess as she had been, and a shadow draped in endless silk. "The kingdom that silences its daughters will drown in their songs," the shadow said, her voice echoing from stone to bone. The girl Alara looked at me once more. "Take it, Lorien. Carry it far. When it touches royal blood again, the chain will break forever." Then both were gone. Only the veil remained, floating gently down into my arms. I left the ruins before dawn. Behind me, the cathedral collapsed in silence, as though it had been waiting for that moment of release. I rode without rest until my horse fell. I buried it beneath an old oak, wrapped the veil again, and swore never to speak of what I had seen. Yet silence has its own way of punishing those who keep it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the reflection of that red moon. Years passed. The veil aged but did not fray. I grew thin, then gray, then old. Still, it waited. One winter, I found shelter in a monastery near the border. The monks took me in, and for a time I believed the whispers had ended. But on the night of the new moon, the abbey bells rang, though no wind blew. In the courtyard, the snow glowed faintly red. The veil had slipped from my satchel and now hung from the crucifix above the well. The abbot fell to his knees, murmuring a prayer I did not recognize. The next morning he begged me to leave. "Whatever that relic is," he said, "it prays louder than we do." I carried it east, beyond the mountains, through villages where no one remembered Varnhelm's name. In one of them, a blacksmith's wife touched the fabric before I could stop her. Her hand blistered instantly, but she smiled through her tears and said, "She's awake." I fled again. It was in the city of Kerith, in a small inn by the river, that I met the scholar. He had studied the lost archives of Ironfell and recognized the symbol embroidered at the veil's edge, a serpent biting its tail. "You have no idea what you carry," he told me. "It is not cloth. It is covenant. Every century it seeks a voice to tell its story, and every voice it finds dies before finishing." He asked to see it by moonlight. I refused. That night he broke into my room. In the morning he was gone, and the river ran red for 3 days. Now I write these last words in the same ink that once darkened her diary. Perhaps someone will find them after I am dust. Perhaps they will unfold the veil again and see her face where mine should be. If so, remember this: she was never the curse. She was the cost. The red silk drinks the sorrow of every soul that tries to silence truth. That is why it will never fade. When I close my eyes tonight, I know she will stand beside my bed. Not the frightened girl behind the glass, but the queen she became beyond it. She will lift the veil, and for the first time I will see her eyes without shadow. And maybe at last the chain will break. But if it does not, if dawn comes and I am gone, do not look for my body. Look for the red veil. Wherever it lies, she is near. Winter passed in silence. The veil remained sealed in its chest of oak and iron, but even through the wood I could feel its pulse. The monastery where I had taken refuge grew colder by the day, and the brothers whispered that a storm unlike any other was approaching. Yet I knew it wasn't the sky that trembled. It was the curse stirring again. One evening a traveler arrived. She wore a cloak of gray wool and carried no torch, but the snow did not touch her. She asked for me by name. "I was sent," she said, "by the woman in the glass." Her voice carried the weight of centuries. I let her in, though every part of me knew this was how it would begin again. She unwrapped a small parcel, a shard of mirror framed in gold. "She left this for you," she said. "The reflection isn't hers anymore. It's yours." When I looked into it, I saw not my face, but the throne room of Varnhelm as it once was, filled with candlelight and laughter before the blood and silence. And there, beneath the crimson veil, stood Alara. She wasn't crying. She wasn't haunting. She was waiting. "You've carried my grief long enough," she whispered. "Now carry my forgiveness." The traveler touched my hand and pressed something cold into it, a ring carved from bone, marked with the same serpent sigil. "When the moon turns white again," she said, "take the veil to the sea. She will meet you there." That night I could not sleep. The monks prayed louder than usual, but their hymns were swallowed by the wind. I packed what little I had, parchment, ink, the mirror shard, and the veil, and began the long walk toward the eastern cliffs. Every mile felt lighter, though the burden on my soul had never been heavier. On the third night, I dreamt of the past again, of the day she disappeared. It was not death that took her, but choice. The court had demanded she marry a prince she did not love, to seal peace through submission. She refused. They called it treason, But when they tried to bind her in silken chains, the veil burned through their hands. It was never cursed. It was her resistance made eternal. When I woke, I found frost shaped like roses on the chest that held the veil. The pattern was so delicate it could only have been drawn by her breath. I smiled for the first time in years. By the time I reached the sea, the moon was white as bone. Waves crashed against black rocks, and the air tasted of iron and salt. I climbed to the edge of the cliff and unfolded the veil. It shimmered faintly, as though the stars themselves had been caught in its weave. For a moment, I thought I saw her reflection in it. Not as a ghost, but as she truly was. Alive, whole, free. I kept my promise, I said aloud. The wind stilled and the sea grew calm. The red faded from the silk, bleeding out into the waves below until the fabric turned white, pure, unmarked, and light as breath. Then a single voice rose from the horizon. It was hers. "The past remembers," she said, "but it no longer rules. The veil slipped from my hands, caught by the tide." I watched it drift away until it was nothing but a glimmer among the stars reflected on the water. And in that stillness I felt it. Peace. The first true peace I had known since the night of her vanishing. When I returned to the monastery, the bells rang again, but this time not in warning. The brothers said a miracle had happened. Every rose in the courtyard, though buried beneath snow, had bloomed overnight. White petals tipped faintly with silver. I said nothing. I simply walked to my cell and placed the mirror shard upon the table. The reflection no longer showed her, nor me. Only light. I began to write, though I do not know who will read this. Perhaps centuries from now someone will find these words and wonder if the princess truly existed. Let them wonder. Some truths do not need belief. They only need remembrance. If you are reading this, and the roses still bloom beneath the frost, then know that the veil is gone, but her spirit is not lost. It lingers in every act of defiance, in every heart that refuses silence. She was never bound by the curse of death, only by the fear of those who tried to erase her. And now the world remembers her not as a ghost but as a promise. I will rest soon. My hand grows weak, my sight dim. But before I go, I will look once more toward the sea. Perhaps I will see the veil floating there again. No longer red, no longer heavy, but light as dawn. If I do, I will follow it. And maybe, in that far-off place where sorrow ends, she will be waiting. Until then, let the record stand. Princess Ilara of Varnhelm did not die. She crossed the mirror, carrying the weight of every forgotten voice, and in doing so, she taught us that even history can be healed. The night I wrote my last entry, I thought I would not see another dawn. Yet morning came softly, washing the monastery walls in gold. The air carried the scent of sea salt and roses, though the nearest coast lay many leagues away. The brothers said the wind had changed, that a new season was beginning. I knew better. Something old had ended. When I stepped outside, the snow had vanished. Dew glimmered on the grass, and the white roses bent under its weight like sleeping stars. In the center of the courtyard stood the fountain that had been dry for decades. Now water flowed again, clear as glass, humming with a low, steady tone, the same note the veil used to whisper in the dark. The abbot approached and said only, "It has forgiven." I could not answer. My throat felt thick with sunlight. That evening I went to the chapel one last time. The mirror shard lay on the altar where I had left it. Yet when I looked into it, I saw not my own reflection, but a landscape bathed in endless dawn. The ruins of Varnhelm restored, towers gleaming, the crimson banners replaced by white. Along the steps walked people I did not know, free of fear and silence. At their center stood a woman with hair like moonlight. She turned once toward me, smiling, and for a heartbeat the mirror was a window. Then it dimmed, leaving only my aged face, eyes wet with gratitude. I knelt and prayed, not to gods or saints, but to the memory of her. "Ilara," I whispered, "your story is no longer hidden." A warmth filled the room, soft as breath. The candle flames bowed, as if the air itself acknowledged her name. I understood then. She had never wanted vengeance, only remembrance. The curse had been nothing more than grief longing to be heard. I left the monastery before dawn. My steps led me south, though I did not plan it. The road curved through forests, reborn with spring, where every branch wore new leaves the color of jade. Birds returned to the sky, and children played in villages that had once spoken of ghosts. No one remembered the old terror of the Vale. They spoke instead of the Lady of Light who had blessed the sea, turning its red tides silver. I smiled at their tales. They were wrong in detail, but right in heart. When I reached the cliffs again, the sea was calm and endless. The wind smelled of salt and lilac. I sat on the same rock where I had released the veil months before. The horizon shimmered faintly, as though something unseen was breathing beneath the surface. Then I saw it, a single thread of white silk rising with the tide, gliding toward me like a swan's feather. It stopped at my feet. Dry, weightless, I touched it, and it dissolved into light. The light did not fade. It wrapped around my hands, my arms, my chest, warm, forgiving. I heard her voice not in my ears, but in my heart. "Thank you, Lorien," she said. "The story is yours now, but the pain is mine no longer." I wanted to answer, but the wind carried my words away. All that remained was the feeling of release, not death, not sorrow, but completion. When I opened my eyes, night had fallen. The moon hung full and white above the sea, and the water reflected it perfectly, as if the world had been remade. I saw just once more her figure walking upon the waves, veilless, crowned not in jewels, but in dawnlight. She looked back, smiled, and vanished into the horizon. And I understood, and the mirror had closed, but not in loss. It had become part of the sky. I stayed on the cliff until the stars dimmed. When I returned to the monastery, I found the brothers gathered around the fountain. The water there now glowed softly, and within its depths lay a single rose, white with a faint red heart at its center. The abbot lifted it carefully and placed it in my hands. "It appeared at first light," he said. "It bears your name." I held it close and felt its pulse, gentle and steady like a living heart. For the first time, I was not afraid. That night I slept without dreams, and when I awoke, I knew it was time. I finished this final page, sealing the chronicle with wax and the ring she had left me. I will leave it here, among the shelves of forgotten books, where someday another wanderer might find it. Let them read and remember that the past is not a prison. It is a seed. From sorrow grows memory, and from memory, light. If they ever ask who she was, tell them this. She was the princess who turned pain into mercy, the woman who refused to vanish, the echo that taught history to sing again, and if they ask who I was, say only that I listened.